Let's get the perspective of the chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber, Martin George, among other things, including the Prime Minister's statement on the fuel price, and we'll find out how the crime situation is affecting businesses in Tobago, if at all. Mr. George, good morning, and thank you very much for
Yes,
being
hi,
with us.
good morning to you, Rishi, and good morning to your viewers.
First of all, how was the Easter weekend in Tobago?
Well, Rishi, by all reports, it was a rousing success in terms of the visitors, the events, the flow of business, and I think still people managed to have a good time and a safe time at the same time. So I think it was definitely something that one would consider a success, and we look forward to it being a springboard for the revitalization of the economy in Tobago as far as domestic tourism is concerned.
Well, that's good news. With so many negative things happening, it's about time we get some good news in terms of progress and possible development and a springboard for better things to happen for us.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And, the point is, even when times are tough, we always tell our members, we say, look, you have to use that as an opportunity to retool, retrofit, make changes and, come back better, stronger, and, more resilient in the circumstances.
Yeah. You've been strongly advocating for more flights between Trinidad and Tobago. You were quite happy, I think, when you saw what is happening with Tobago and Barbados and what Caribbean Airlines is doing in that regard. Caribbean Airlines over the Easter weekend from April 14th to 18th said the airline carried 5,767 passengers and operated 120 flights on the domestic air bridge between Trinidad and Tobago. This was confirmed in a statement that the company shared yesterday. Are you satisfied with the numbers, the amount of flights and passengers that would have traveled?
Well, the point is, once there was adequate capacity and persons didn't have to wait for hours in the airport, then we are happy. If you follow me, so if that's the situation that occurred, then we are happy. And I think by all reports, even when reporters went up to the airports, they did not see any long lines or any backlogs of persons, waiting for hours and hours for flights. And that's what we say should be the norm. This should not be an exception just for a special holiday or anything. So this is supposed to be the norm. In other words, anytime any Trinbagonian wants to travel between the islands, they're supposed to be able to do so freely, without a hassle of waiting hours and hours and hours to get a flight.
Yeah. So that is what happened on the domestic air bridge. How is it looking so far? Are you seeing a lot of tourists coming on the island? International tourists?
Well, in terms of, remember Tobago's tourism, so to speak, has for years been largely the domestic tourism. Let's be honest about that. Okay, so in terms of international arrivals, they are coming back slowly. But as I've always said, it has to be a very determined and stubborn person to decide to come internationally to Tobago, because there are so many hurdles that are often put in the way. The marketing thrust is not adequate. The service delivery on the ground in Tobago is not adequate. It's something I have called out repeatedly. I've spoken against it. The disincentives to investment, for instance, the Foreign Investment Act, which we've called upon the government repeatedly to repeal. These are things that create obstacles and disincentives to persons wanting to come to Tobago.
So, of course, we need to improve that, the marketing of the Tobago tourism product. It's something that I've heard talked about, and I know that the Secretary of Tourism is working on that. Trinidad as well, we need to market our tourism product better. Probably first we need to upgrade our tourism sites before we actually start marketing it. But the Magdalena as well, what is happening with that? I'm hearing again that it's up for sale.
Well, I think no, not for sale. I think they're looking for a new operator. So I think the government is out on the hunt looking for a new operator for the plant. And this again is never good, because the fact of the matter is that you don't develop any traction when you have this changing of operators, so repeatedly. So I don't know who they are looking at, but I hope that it is an international brand, which in and of itself could attract, visitors. If you recall, years ago, it used to be the Hilton, Tobago.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, Hilton, because of the deterioration of the physical plant and machinery and the infrastructure, they said no, we are not going to allow our brand to remain on this crumbling infrastructure that you have here, right? So the government then did a 200 million upgrade, and then they looked for operators. They had Vanguard at one point, then now Magdalena, and apparently now they are on the hunt again, trying to get an operator for it.
Yeah, and there are plans afoot for a Tobago Carnival in late October 2022. Tobago really doesn't have that major brand of a hotel. It's something that I know that they say that they're working on, they're going to do it. But with all of these plans
Well,
that the
well,
Supreme Court
they
hopefully pushes
squandered a
there.
golden opportunity when Sandals and Beaches were going to come there and invest. And, it's something I still, for the life of me, cannot understand why the average Tobagonian could not see the benefit of having that type of brand. But, sometimes, as it's said, sometimes a people without a vision shall surely perish. So if you don't have that vision, it's difficult to understand and appreciate the value of that type of brand.
Because I'm looking at it from the Magdalena perspective, and yes, we would have had over 5,000 people probably coming to Tobago. We expect that there is going to be a lot more for Tobago Carnival, and so therefore it bodes well for the hotels in Tobago. But because we don't have that major brand, how much of an impact is that? And do you think Magdalena can carry the weight of what is really desirable? Is it just spending money over and over to refurbish and nothing really substantive?
Well, that's the thing, because the Magdalena is just a 200-room hotel. It's just about 200 and something rooms. So it's not even a large hotel. So at the end of the day, we still need more room stock in Tobago, and we need greater investment in proper training for service delivery by the persons on the ground in Tobago. This is a pet peeve of mine, and I have repeatedly said to the Tobagonians, you can't expect visitors to leave from where they are, come to Tobago and get bad service and think that they will want to come back again. We have to up our game, and that's one of the benefits that would have been derived from the Sandals Beaches experience, because they, in terms of their service and quality, they are top drawer. They make no exceptions. They rarely, are sticklers for that.
Yeah, and well, we hopefully that would improve because businesses should do well as long as tourists come in. How are you all planning for Carnival?
Well, the thing is, the THA is basically driving the process at this point. I hope that they will be willing to take on board the advice and guidance of persons who are experienced and knowledgeable in the business of Carnival, so that they will widen the net to ensure that the major stakeholders in Carnival are involved. If it is that they want to keep it, in terms of a closed-minded, closeted production, then I'm not sure how successful it will be.
Well, hopefully they keep it open-minded. They will get advice, I'm sure, from the stakeholders, not just in Tobago, but in Trinidad as well. Mr.
But
George, I
Richie,
want...
it's not just a question of getting advice, it's what you do with the advice.
Well, hopefully they take the advice and they implement it so that we can have something that is successful, because what is going to... And the other thing is, right, Carnival in Trinidad, we had the taste of Carnival. The state said they were going to spend about $15 million. We got about, less than $3 million in return from direct business. Which many people are looking at as another failed enterprise this year again, because the NCC isn't making any money. Yes, some would argue, well, there are the indirect achievements that you would have gotten probably through employment, and businesses might make a little extra money, but people are not seeing it that way. Is that how should we look at it?
And the fact of the matter is that the way we have structured our major Carnival entities, when you look at, the organizations, TUCO, NCC, NCBA, all of them, they have basically been on state sponsorship, so to speak. And they have never weaned themselves off of that. So we need to look at the whole, paradigm of how we market the business of Carnival and treat with it differently, both in Trinidad and, of course, I'm hoping that Tobago makes a new start in that regard.
Yeah, so we wait to see how things progress with that. Mr. George, I want to get your thoughts on the fuel price increase, the implications for businesses in Tobago. I always get the view that items in Tobago are slightly more expensive than in Trinidad, and in some cases you can understand why, because when items come here, you then have to ship it across to Tobago. Do you expect a significant increase or an increase in the price of items there?
Well, because of the knock-on effect of the fuel being the lifeblood of the transportation industry, any goods that need to be delivered, therefore you are looking at an increased cost. You saw the Truckers and Haulers Association already, complaining. You've seen fishermen complaining. You've seen taxi drivers complaining. So it is expected that there will be increases in the prices of goods and services in Tobago as a result of the fuel price increase. What I felt was that the government ought to have managed this a bit better, in the sense that if it is that they embarked upon a campaign of education and explanation and clarification, and if they also delayed the implementation, I have said that they should have held it back and sought to implement it maybe by 1st January 2023. So you give people a period of adjustment, because most businesses are now, coming out of the ashes of the pandemic, now trying to get yourselves organized, now trying to, get back to some level of normalcy and hopefully profitability. And then to be hit with this, you now are looking at having to make further adjustments. So I just felt that the timing of it was rather unfortunate, and the implementation, I think, lacked the clarity and the explanation which would have gotten that buy-in from the public. So therefore, it ended up being something that the government is basically force-feeding you, by shoving it down your throat that, look, you have no choice. You have to accept this. I thought that it could have been managed better.
Yeah, generally I get the sense of that's how the government operates. And I don't mean to make it overly political, but we've made this decision, and this is a decision that we're going to stand with until probably we get the opportunity to ask a question. We did see the Minister of Finance tweet a couple times on this matter, but again, it lacked clarity, and we saw the Automotive Dealers Association still asking for clarity on
exactly. And
hybrid vehicles.
If you have scenarios where government ministers, in delivering these types of messages, do so with a type of glib, slick arrogance, then the public will never feel comfortable in terms of accepting it, in terms of the buy-in. You ought to basically come to the level of the people and say, hey, listen, folks, this is the situation, and give that human face to it, rather than you sending out a tweet. I mean, what is this? Is this back to the days of Donald Trump, where you're tweeting out things of national importance?
Yeah. So would you then say it lacked compassion, or the minister lacked compassion? Even when he announced it, I thought I got that level of arrogance as well that normally comes with the Minister of Finance. Would you say it lacked compassion?
Well, all I would say is he delivered it in his normal style, and we all know what that is.
Yeah. The Prime Minister yesterday indicated that if the price of oil drops on the international market, then we will see the decrease in the price of fuel. But he also went further to say that
But Rashid, sorry, let me just take up that point.
Yeah.
What I find amazing is that we in Trinidad and Tobago have come full circle. If you recall, years ago, we used to be elated as a nation when the price of oil was high, because it meant that we had greater revenues, greater income. This is a testament of how devastated our oil and gas economy has become, whereby we are now complaining when the world oil and fuel prices are high, instead of us rejoicing and saying, well, yes, we're going to get a windfall. What has become of Trinidad and Tobago? That is what I would like to find out. That now we're talking about, we are hoping that the price drops. So that means we are not benefiting as an oil exporting nation or as an oil producing nation from the high prices.
And that is such a major thing, though, and I don't think that the discussion is surrounded enough.
People are not talking about that. People are accepting this story about, well, let's wait for the world prices to drop. Listen, less than 10 years ago, we would be excited at the fact that world oil prices were so high, at record highs, because we knew that that would mean extra billions of dollars in revenue coming to us. Now we are in a position, we as an oil producing nation, oil and gas producing nation, we are lamenting the fact that prices are so high. What on earth is going on with our economy?
Yeah, and that's the thing, because even myself, I'm like, I'm really looking forward to for the price to drop now, because I want to pay less for fuel.
That's the sad reality of where we are in Trinidad and Tobago. We are in a serious economic crisis, and nobody seems to want to address the elephant in the room or take the bull by the horns and talk about these issues.
But then you had the Minister of Finance just last year, just a couple of weeks ago, saying last year we would have seen some sort of recovery in the performance of our economy. And with this situation, people are saying, well, it's really contradicting itself. Are we really seeing development? Are we seeing progress? Because at the end of the day, me as a man on the ground and other people, they aren't feeling any sort of recovery.
And that's the reality, because the fact of the matter is, when you get these reports from politicians, unfortunately, most times they are delivered with some sort of political flavor or political spin, instead of it being a clear, unbiased, objective analysis. And that's the challenge we have in the situation.
Yeah. And I don't know, and probably you could share your thoughts as well, how you feel about the comparing of different countries and the fuel price in the different countries.
It's an artificial construct, because you have to look at so many other factors in terms of each nation's GDP, GNP, population size, population density. So I mean that type of comparison is artificial. So I do not pay attention to any of those comparisons.
But it's interesting that we use that, and politicians use it all the time, for their political gain and political mileage.
Yes, of course. And that's why they like to carry us down that road,
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, that is not the determining factor here. The determining factor is basically, listen, you are a country that has been blessed with oil and gas reserves over the years. You have produced billions of barrels of oil and cubic feet of gas. What have you really generated or done with it? Where has that wealth gone? And the thing is, we have to look at other countries. You look at Norway. When they discovered their oil and gas, the first thing they did was to establish their sovereign wealth fund, which now stands in excess of $1 trillion US, Rishi. 1 trillion. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. You can look it up, right? And that is their reserve. So in other words, they didn't go out on a wild spending spree and, had, profligate spending and, wild excesses. They said, no, let's set aside the money, and I mean, well, we belatedly sought to do that by establishing the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. But then we set it aside, and then every now and again we're dipping in it. That's not the way you build savings. The way you build savings is, look, you keep putting aside money and you will live like you don't have that money. So the savings will continue building up. But if you keep dipping in the savings all the time, you will never have savings.
As you mentioned, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund that we have, that doesn't seem to be in very good shape either, because according to a Guardian article, the value of the country's Heritage and Stabilization Fund fell by close to US $268 million US dollars, or TT $1.821 billion at the end of the financial year last year. And so the money there, the government is taking out money, they say, to stabilize the economy. So our savings itself doesn't look all that great.
It's been depleted all the time. It's been depleted, and that's the challenge. So therefore, you really running in a scenario where you basically gonna be running out of your financial resources in some time, if it is that you don't implement some serious measures to turn around the economy. And that's the big picture I'm seeing, and that's what nobody is addressing and nobody seems to want to talk about.
And I think that is the problem, because this to me is a major thing and we're not really hearing much conversation about it. Of course, we go to the political, as soon as something comes up, we run, or to make it a political issue immediately, and that takes away from the substance of the real
And it gets
conversation that
lost.
we can
Yeah,
have.
it gets lost in the red or yellow shades of
Or
political
green.
flavor or green. So
Mr. Judge,
we're now like a stoplight, red,
yeah, yeah,
yellow,
yeah.
and green.
But the suggestion by the Prime Minister on the fuel issue is that the Ministry of Finance, they're working on their strategy to set a price at the start of the month based on what the projected oil price is. Do you think that's a good strategy, something that could work?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that, I mean, they are exploring options, but we, the consumers, are the ones who, regardless of what fancy formulae they work out, when we are there at the pump, we can't use a formula to determine how much we pay. We just basically have to pay whatever price is set there. So you have, as government, that responsibility to ensure that you cushion the effect of these increases so that the average person does not suffer too much by these increases. And that's where I think that more could be done to help the man in the street in this regard.
And of course, for the population's sake, the man on the ground, the lower the oil price on the international market, the less we're going to have to pay for fuel.
And
Basically.
that is what I find so amazing about our economic scenario, that we have reached the stage where we are happy with low world oil and gas prices. And we are an oil and gas producing nation. Think about that, Rishi.
So simply put then, it's mismanagement that has got us to this position.
Yeah. Nothing but that. Nothing but that. Nothing but mismanagement.
Any thoughts or suggestions on how we could possibly get out of this predicament?
Well, it comes down to a question of leadership. And I mean, I'm talking successive leadership over the years, over the decades, over, different administrations. It's a question of leadership. We've not had the type of leadership that can, basically pull us up by the bootstraps and take us to where we need to be. You look at the example of Singapore, where Lee Kuan Yew took that nation, which was, basically from nothing, and it's now the fourth largest financial center in the world. Singapore is a first world nation of the highest order. They have a massive port. They have massive, transshipment. Listen, they are so highly sophisticated and developed. It is unbelievable. And people want to invest there. They want to go there. But that was because of the leadership. He told his people, he said, listen, the value of a nation is not in the natural resources it has, It's in the management and leadership that can maximize the potential of your resources, including your human resources. And that's what we've consistently failed to do in Trinidad and Tobago over the years.
Let me steal a thought then from the Prime Minister. Why don't you go and live in Singapore? A thought, not the exact one.
That is such an absurd and, inane response to something like that, in the sense that we are supposed to look at examples of successful nations and try to emulate and pattern them. So therefore, look at Dubai. Look at what the leader in Dubai did. Look how he transformed that place. And Dubai had more oil and gas than Trinidad and Tobago. And since back then, he said, no, we're not going to be relying on oil and gas. It's there, we will use it, but that's not going to be our future. He then pivoted to tourism. So Dubai now is actually the number one tourist destination in the world, They have surpassed Disney. They have surpassed Disney. They are now the number one tourist destination in the world. And, not satisfied with that, they are now pivoting again. So they have the oil and gas as their base, they have tourism, and they are pivoting again, and they are aiming to become the leading medical center for the world. So when they are finished with their plans, everybody will be flying to Dubai for medical reasons. Anything you need, it will be. So that's their next big plan. And that's what leadership is about. So therefore, if you as a leader in a small emerging economy in the Caribbean, if you don't want to look around at proper examples of good leadership and educate and elevate your mind and your thinking, then of course you'll remain, at the bottom of the barrel, fighting with the other crabs down there.
But do you think it's fair for us as Trinidad and Tobago to look at what is happening in Guyana and Barbados, for example, and make comparisons and probably take or tailor some of their workings to us?
Listen, Rishi, if you want to learn, then you must be willing to listen to all views. You must be willing to take on board advice from all quarters. It doesn't mean you accept all, but you distill it, you assess it, you take the good, you throw away the bad. And that's what learning and development and elevation of oneself is about. So if it is that you are seeing good examples even within the Caribbean, then what is wrong with looking at it and learning from it and saying, well, hey, listen, partners, you're onto a good thing there. Let's collaborate. Let's have discussions, rather than you remaining in this arrogant posture where you're painting yourself into a corner to basically say, well, I know it all and I don't need advice from anybody or guidance from anybody. It just doesn't appear to me to be the best way to advance or develop your country.
Yeah. The Prime Minister is expected to visit Guyana next month, agriculture forum that they're having. He recently came back from Barbados. One of the major talking points there would have been the banking sector partnering with the U.S. Makes sense? A good opportunity for us? Good opportunities?
Well, I mean, certainly it does because, I mean, with things like FACTA and all of those pieces of legislation, the international banking system is so intertwined that it's either you are with it or you are excluded. So I don't think we really have a choice there.
Yeah. So, Mr. George, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Always a pleasure chatting. Quite insightful conversation as well.
Rishi, and good morning to you, and good morning to your viewers, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much. Martin George, Chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber.